Hello and welcome to a new video. In this video we're going to talk about soldering, what I use when I solder and what I think you need when you're going to start soldering. What I do when I solder is I build mostly guitars and pedals, but I sometimes do build things like weird electronic things that I'm just experimenting with, or maybe guitar amplifiers. And so these are just the things that I use, and you don't need all of them for all the things. If you're going to build guitars and only guitars, you don't necessarily need everything that I'm going to use. But these are the things that I use for the things that I build most of the times, and so I'm just going to share that real quickly with you, and hopefully it will help you somewhat at least know what you're getting into when it comes to the electrical components of building guitars and pedals. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to talk to me in the comments below. The first thing is a soldering iron. Most of you most likely know that you're gonna need a soldering iron to do solder, and you can get one of these really cheap, inexpensive ones from some place like Amazon or your local hardware store. Doesn't really matter. They're somewhere around $5 to $10 depending on where you get them. Basically, I think that this one I bought for around €7, and they do the job fairly okay-ish. It's nothing special. You can get by with one of these for a long time and build a lot of guitars, and it's very easy. You plug it in, you wait for it to heat up. It takes a couple of minutes, maybe 3 or possibly 5, somewhere in between, and then you do your soldering, and for most things you're going to be fine with this. The tip is screwed in, and so when you need to, you can screw it off and change it out. Buying new tips costs almost as much as buying a new one, so keep that in mind if you're one of those people that don't want to create a lot of waste. This is, however, not the one I use nowadays. The one I use nowadays is this one, and this one is just a nicer quality, even though it looks a little bit rough now because I've used it for so many years. It's sturdier build, feels nicer to hold. It has an on-off switch, so you don't have to depend on it being plugged into the wall and making sure that you unplug and things like that. It also has a display that shows you what kind of heat you're using, so you can regulate the heat. And I mostly use this because when you're building pedals, you have different kind of components, and some of them are really heat sensitive. So it's really important to make sure that you don't, destroy what you're working with as you're building it. It's not super important when you're building guitars because you don't have that many components and they're not really that sensitive to heat unless you're building something with a circuit board or something like that in it. But for most guitar building, you're doing something very standard like Tele or a Strat or Les Paul, you most likely are not going to need the heat regulator in it. It also has a holder for the soldering iron, so you don't have to worry about where to put the soldering iron. It also has a place for a sponge, which is not there right now because I need to get a new one, but it has a place for a sponge you can easily clean off the solder, which helps you keep the tip longer without it getting ruined, because you need to clean your tip of your soldering iron. So yeah, I would recommend that you get one of those soldering irons. A station basically is what they're called, if you're thinking of maybe making more things than just guitars, and if you're maybe getting to a point where you're more serious about what you're doing. It's not necessarily, an investment that you need to do, and it's not something that like your customers, if you're going down the road of actually selling something, is ever going to notice. So yeah, but one of these will be a perfect way to start off with your soldering, and you don't have to worry a bunch about it. Okay, so the next thing you're gonna need is obviously a spool of the actual solder. Now this that I have right here is, you can't actually see what it is, but it's most likely like 1/2 mil thickness or something like that, because it's accidentally sprayed over the sticker that tells me what it is. I am a genius. No, but seriously, you'll need thinner wires when you are building something with small components where you just need to put a little bit of solder on, and you'll need thicker wire when you're putting down something really heavy. In a guitar, I would say you need something around maybe 1 mil thick, and then for like pedals and things like that, most of the time you'll need something that is maybe, 1/2 mil, which I think this is, if I remember correctly. Yeah, that's basically all you need. You can go a little bit heavier on the guitar, maybe like 1.5 mil or 2 mil, but you know, when it comes to thickness, yeah, those two are basically what you're gonna need. And you can use super thin on guitars as well. It just takes a little bit longer and it will heat up faster and things like that. So it might be a little bit harder to control, but you'll get used to it basically. So you're gonna need a couple of pliers for different kind of wiring cutting. And you're gonna need a wire cutter. They usually look something like this. They're a little bit bigger, or they're actually kind of small, but you'll see what I mean with a little bit bigger. Because the next thing you're gonna need is a different kind of wire cutter. They are very tiny like this. They have a flat side on one side and they have the edge for the actual sharpness, which is a very bad way of explaining things. But they basically look the same. They're just a little bit different. Now this one you'll use to cut your wires to the length that you need them. And I know if you've been on my channel, you've seen me use a scissor a lot, and it's because I have a lot of scissors lying around, but it's not really good for them to cut wires. And also I'm super lazy. You shouldn't be lazy when you're building things. I am, and I'm trying not to be, so I'm telling you that you should have one of those, and I know I'm never using one of those, but don't do the mistakes I do, is what I'm trying to say. These ones are for cutting things like the legs of components. So for example, when you're building a guitar, you'll put in a capacitor on the tone knob, because the tone and volume are basically the same. And so to cut the legs, you should have something like this. Now, you could obviously, in that case, use anything to cut those legs because they're very thin, because you don't need to get in a tight little spot. But when you have like a PCB and you're cutting the legs of transistors and diodes and things like that on the PCB, and you're building a guitar pedal, there'll be a bunch of things sticking out and you want to get in between and you want to like cut away. Then you're going to need one of these. So again, telling you that there are 3 you need, but you basically only need this one, and you don't need this one if you're only going to build guitars. But then again, you know, if you're building guitars, I think you should try building pedals too, because it's a lot of fun. And sometimes it's even more fun. So the next thing you're going to need is a wire stripper. Now, I can't for the life of me find my wire stripper, so I can't show you how it looks. But then again, I'm using an old vintage wire stripper that I got from my grandfather. So the only reason why I'm using it is because it was his. You can find wire strippers that are newer and have better designs, and what they basically do is they clamp down on the wire and they pull away the plastic outer shielding, exposing the wires. And you need that to cut away on everything. You've seen me do it with a scissor, you can do it with a scissor, but it will look nicer, neater, more professional. It will work better for you to use a wire stripper. So get a wire stripper. I have a wire stripper. I do use a wire stripper sometimes when I can find it. So the next thing that you're gonna need is some sort of helper. They're usually called like third hands or helper hands or something like that. Different names, but they do the same thing. And it's basically just so you can hold things. Again, this is one of those things that you might not necessarily need that much when you're building guitars, but they're nice to have when you're building guitars. But they're going to be super important when you're building pedals because, you know, they're so tiny components and a PCB, and you can hold all these things together at the same time. And when you're trying to hold like 5 small pieces together at the same time, and you're going in there with a soldering iron, you're doing all this fiddly work, and then all of a sudden you have, you know, burnt yourself. And you can burn yourself really badly on a soldering iron. So they usually look like this. Now I have mine mounted to a piece of wood, and it's just because this tiny little base will easily fall over and I just can't have it. So I need to have it like this. And they have these little alligator clippings, and you can just, you know, put whatever you need on it. And you can put some shrink tube over, and you can make them a little bit softer if you are afraid that the teeth are gonna break something. But get one of these and use it. Try to get used to using it, because it's really gonna help you out. I also use 2 other kinds of helping hands that I have made myself, and one of them I've shown you in one of my Guitar Builders Life Hacks before, and if you haven't seen all of those episodes, you should definitely go and look at them. I have made a playlist, look at them. There are actually some really good tips in there for making it easy to build guitar. But one of them is this, the male connector to an output jack mounted to a piece of wood so that it can stand up. Because putting on the output jack is actually more fiddly than you might think it is. You need to hold the jack in place, hold the wire in place, feed solder into it to melt the two connections together. And you also need to hold the soldering iron at the same time. And unless you're some weird alien, you only have two hands like me. So this is actually, you know, a really good one. And if you have a broken cable or something like that, this is a good way to recycle them. So we're getting back to the whole, you know, environmentalist thing. Another thing I've done is I've built this little helper. Now, I wouldn't say that you need this for soldering. This is more for testing things. For example, let's say you have a guitar that is broken and you're trying to figure out what is wrong. You can test components, electrical components in this, and see what happens. You plug your guitar in one way and your amp the other way, and then you can just take these alligator clippers away and you can put them on a component, and you can let the signal from your guitar go through the component. Now I use this to see if things are working the way they are supposed to, or to see what happens if I find something weird and crazy and I want to see like, do these affect the sound in a weird way? You know, because I'm always looking for something new. So, very easy to make. It's just a piece of wood and two washers glued in with epoxy, and then two jacks put in. Ground wire is soldered in place, and a clipper is soldered in place. Okay, so the next thing, you might think that you don't need, and you might actually even find maybe videos of people telling you that you don't need it, but don't listen to them. Anyone who tells you that you don't need this is not your friend. Actually, it's a great way to find out if your friends are really your friends. This is a solder sucker. Now, this particular one is my favorite, and I recommend you getting one of these because they're super easy. It's basically a soldering iron, but it's hollow at the tip, which I hope you can see. And it has a little vacuum thing, so you push this in here, like that, and then you just press it. Now, what that lets you do is super easily heat up the solder that you're gonna remove, and then just suck it up and remove it. And the thing is, when you're building guitars, pedals, amps, you name it, at some point you are gonna make a mistake. It might not be the first thing you do, it might not be the third or ninth thing you do, but at some point, you know, you're just gonna put a capacitor in the wrong place, or, you know, solder an output jack or an input jack or whatever backwards, you know, putting a ground wire where it shouldn't be. And you can definitely like heat up with your soldering iron the solder and pull at the thing and jig it out and things like that. And the thing is, you're gonna burn yourself a lot of times doing it that way. And sometimes it will work really easy, and sometimes it won't. And sometimes you're just gonna have a PCB that you need to clean it up. There's too much gunk on it. You need one of these, basically, is what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to convince you, but you're probably already convinced. You probably know that you need one of these. This one I bought for 16 euros at my local hardware store. So you can definitely find them. They're not that expensive, and you're gonna save a lot of time and energy, and it's actually kind of fun to use because you can afterwards point it away from yourself, and you can like shoot that. If you push this really quickly like this, you can shoot smoke out of them, so it's almost like having a toy gun or something. I don't know. Anyway, they're really good and you really need to use them, and yeah, get one. The next thing you're going to need is extension cables with alligator clippers on the top. These lets you make connections and try things out before you actually solder things in place. And it might seem like something you don't need and that is maybe, you know, a waste of money to buy. First of all, they're like a pack of 10 for like, I don't know, 10 bucks, something like that. They're usually not that expensive. And you can buy them on, you know, Amazon or something like that and get them probably even cheaper. I don't know. My point is, soldering a bunch of things together and then trying them out and realize that you've done 5 mistakes. It takes a lot of time. Putting these on, making sure things are right the first time, and then soldering them will save you a lot of time. Especially when you get into the habit of using these things and you're not, you know, like, you get it into your workflow, basically is what I'm trying to say. It will save you a lot of time and a headache or two, especially if you don't have the next thing that you need. Okay, so the next thing that you need is you need to think about ventilation. You're not supposed to breathe in solder. Fumes and things like that are not good for you. I have fan mounted to the wall. It's actually one of those fans that you get to use in the summer so that you're not getting overheated, but it's mounted directly next to a window. I can open the window and I can pull the smoke out. And I actually have two in each end of the room where I solder, and it's just to help me. I also have a very tiny little computer fan that I pulled out of an old computer that I soldered a 9-volt battery clip on to, and I can use that as well. You're gonna need electrical tape. You can also get shrink tube, and it's gonna help you a lot. So it's a good idea to have, because there is always some place where you may get two things that shouldn't be connected leaning really close up into each other, so if something moves a little bit, maybe those two things will shorten each other out, and you can put a little bit of electrical tape between, to just make sure nothing bad happens. Or for example, maybe you want to lower your pickups and you know that you have put down shielding tape on the inside, and you don't want the ground connection on the back of the pickup to touch that, because you'll get a ground circle or whatever it's called in the inside of the cavity. You can put some electrical tape on the insulation tape on the inside, just where the pickups are. I've actually had that as a problem more times than you might actually think. I would also suggest that you buy a lot of different colors so that you can do some color matching and color coding, and make sure that here I have a piece of blue tape and a piece of green tape and a piece of red tape, so I know exactly what is happening. Okay, next thing you're gonna need is one of those things that I feel people are telling you that you should get, and everyone's like, I don't want to buy one of those, I don't want to waste money, I just want to buy the bare minimum of things that I need. And I can totally understand that, and I don't want you to feel like you're wasting money, but there is spectra, or whatever you want to say. On one hand, you don't want to waste money, but on the other hand, you can save yourself headaches if you have this tool. And I use this basically every time I do some sort of soldering, so it's actually maybe the best thing to have, but you know what they say, save the best for last. So you're gonna need a multimeter. You don't have to buy anything weird or fancy. The cheapest one you can get will probably work fine for a long time. It's when you're getting really serious that you're gonna have to upgrade, and if you start doing really complicated and weird things, you might need to buy things. But for most guitar pedals that you're gonna build, and for most guitars you're gonna build, a regular cheap one is gonna work fine. I've had this one for a couple of years now, more than a couple of years actually, and it served me really well. And sometimes you're building something and you just can't figure out why it's wrong. You look at the schematic, you look at the build, everything should be working, and then you just pull this out and you start measuring things, and you realize that some parts are broken, or something really important is broken. And it's just like, you wasted 9 hours trying to make this pedal work, and it would have never worked because the parts are broken. So get one of these. Don't complain. Don't tell me that I don't want to have to buy a multimeter. Just buy yourself a multimeter, learn how it works, and you're gonna be happy. I promise you. If you want to build guitars, this is gonna be your best friend. Well, I hope you liked the video. Let me know in the comments below if any of this helped. And if you have any questions, maybe there was something that you use that I don't use that I need to know about. Maybe I forgot something, because I feel like I forgot something. There's probably something more that I'm using that I'm not remembering at the moment. But anyway, I hope this will help. It's at least a starter. There are better, more fancy things you could use instead of some of the things I showed you. There are also probably cheaper things that you can get away with. Try to think about things like your breathing and making sure that you're not getting fumes in your lungs, because that's really important. And also things like not burning yourself, because if you're building a guitar and you're putting all the wires in it together yourself and you're soldering a bunch and you burn yourself like 9 times, you're not gonna have fun. You're gonna be angry, you're gonna be pissed off, and you're gonna have to go and put ice on your hands and things like that, and you know something that should take 10 minutes is gonna take 4 hours, because you have to run away and cool down your wounds and things like that. So yeah, Even if you don't necessarily need all the things that I use here to solder a guitar together, having most of them are going to make it more fun and interesting and a more joyful experience. Yeah, so hopefully this video helps. Let me know in the comments below. If you're new to the channel, I would very much appreciate if you like the video and if you subscribe. Talk to me in the comments below. And thanks to all the people who are already subscribed. It makes me very happy to see that the channel is growing and that there are people out there who seem to enjoy the videos that I make. Anyway, until next time, stay awesome and cool and go and solder something. Even if it's just for practice. Because if you've never soldered before, today is the day you start.